All right, welcome back to Daybreak here, still on News Review with Javas Bigambo, Wanjiru Gikonyo, Dr. Sam Kamau, and Ambassador Yvonne Hamati. And we want to take a look at the feedback you've been sending to us via Twitter, Citizen TV Kenya. I also believe on SMS line 22422. What do we have? This is Samo Indi. He's been quite a viewer this year, right? I know. We cannot talk about the economy without basically addressing the issues of corruption, accountability, greed, theft of public resources by those in the apex of leadership and power.
Let's see who else. Even Engineer Lazaro this year has been quite a viewer. Good morning to you, Lazaro. You say a lot of corruption with the mega projects without advice from an economic expert are some of the cause of dwindling economy.
Hilary Ngasura, I disagree with Yvonne. Why allow foreigners to come and work in the country, doing what that can be done by Kenyans? They allow Indians, Chinese, etc. to work as foremen, teachers, accountants, etc. Some even with visitors' cards and others illegally.
Justus, you say our Kenyan economy is limping because the government was overambitious with the mega projects. The multi-billion ended up in people's pockets. Call it corruption. SMEs cannot thrive with the level of corruption in this country.
All right, that's what you have to say. You can still join the conversation by tweeting us at Citizen TV Kenya with the hashtag Daybreak, and also text us via 22422. We want us to look at the terrorism in 2019. And we started on the 15th of January with that horrific attack at the Dusi Date Hotel at the Riverside Drive, along the Riverside Drive. And 21 people lost their lives, and also 5 terrorists were killed in that incident. And then again, there has been several other small attacks, including recently in Garissa, where 11 people were killed. I believe there were 8 police officers, there were 2 teachers, and was it 1 doctor or something? So the efforts that we have seen, because just, is it last week, we saw a barracks being opened in Garissa. And one might argue that the attacks are becoming less and less in terms of the impact. Are we on the right track? I keep asking that question. Begin with you, Dr. Sam.
Thank you. The beginning of the year, like you have said, January 15th attack at 14 Riverside, reminded us, because after a period of tranquility, and peace, and then this happened, it reminded us that terrorism and the threat of terrorism remains a constant threat. While we say it's a global phenomenon, Kenya has always been at risk because of several factors, partly because of our, common boundary or border with Somalia, but also because of the, emergence and existence of Al-Shabaab, but also because of Kenya's, strategic location as a hub in this particular area. Having said that, it means, therefore, it will always be at risk as a country then. It simply means in terms of more vigilance, in terms of the measures that we are putting in place. And I think also, and one of the things we can say about the 14 Riverside attack, while yes, unfortunately, we lost lives, it didn't feel like defeat the way it had happened in the previous incidences. Right. The fact that 700 people were rescued from that particular complex, it felt like our response this time was much better. In terms of the coordination was much better, the communication appeared much better. That doesn't mean that the threat has been contained or these issues are over. It simply means continued vigilance. It simply means more measures in terms of what you're talking about, intelligence gathering, in terms of intelligence sharing, in terms of cooperating with our neighbors, in terms of working with the regional bodies. But I think most important, and for me this is important, what we have understood and learned from back in the days of 2014, while we can respond to the threat of terrorism with our military might and these other issues, part of it, and an important bit, is dealing with the issue of radicalization in specific areas and regions within the country, where I've seen that populations of people are at risk to being recruited into these terror activities, which relates to a number of issues in terms of where would young people be attracted, because this, for the first time now with the Dusit one, we saw actually it was local, it was homegrown. It's people actually from Kiambu, from regions that primarily or previously were not associated with that. So it's also in terms of trying to fix these issues that would expose young people to feeling hopeless, and therefore somebody can take advantage of that. So I think in terms of measures to deal with the radicalization, which has been happening a lot, especially in the rural coast region, focusing on that so that it is not always about responding to the threat when it happens or an attack when it happens, but there are certain measures that have already been put in place in terms of the different programs which I've seen around, and I think some of them have been involved in it, just basically trying to deal with these narratives, these counter-narratives that would help us deal with this issue.
Ambassador Yvonne, before I come to each of us, very quickly, paint for me an image, because at the end of the day, it has a ripple effect in our tourism and in our wildlife. CS Balala was saying how last year we saw about 2 million visitors coming into Kenya, sort of an upgrade from the previous years and on how our tourism sector has dwindled. Again, there's a ripple effect to this when it comes to our tourism. Accountability. Are we doing well on that forefront?
Let me say this, having served for 4 years in Somalia, is that I think Kenya is doing pretty well. And I know that it seems like a cliche when we say that it's a global issue, but terrorism is a global issue. And if you look at Kenya and you look at our placing on the map, and you look at our proximity to our neighbors and so on and so forth, you know, it is easy for us to be targeted. But it's big brother, so we have a lot more responsibility, and I think we've been doing quite well with KDF.
Do you think we should pull our troops out?
Absolutely not. There's no reason to pull our troops out. We made a commitment to the government and the people of Somalia that we will stay in Somalia.
At the expense of Kenyan lives?
Oh no, it's not at the expense of Kenyan lives, and that is one thing we must realize, that all lives matter. At the end of the day, and that we have a responsibility to our neighbors, to our region.
Absolutely.
And that you cannot separate Somali from Kenya.
Right.
We are one and the same people. We are brothers and sisters, same clans that are there in Mogadishu are here in Kenya. And therefore, we must, by all means necessary, ensure that we stay and we remove the elements that are Al-Shabaab, Al-Qaeda, and whatever terrorist elements exist within this region. And that, I think, as the president has said and the government has said, we will do. And we're not going to run away from it. And it would be harder, actually, for us to pull out, because then our losses we may not be able to manage what happens.
Okay, Javas, you wanted to jump in.
Well, I think more than 350 days have now passed since the Dusit experience, a place about 10 kilometers from here. And the events of that day still stay in our memories and the national conscience. Well, factually speaking, our borders are far less porous than they were 10, 15 years ago. The work that our security agencies are doing is commendable. Many possible attacks have been foiled. The principles of our national security are being lived up to by especially national agencies. And we can easily commend the work of the security agencies and the head of our military and armed forces, the president. That notwithstanding, we have to bring ourselves to the hard fact that still much more work needs to be done. That, as Dr. Sam has indicated, the issue of radicalization goes back to the economic issues that we were talking about earlier. Because as long as the issue of unemployment will continue to rise or remain the same, far too many young people will be susceptible to radicalization. Far too many people will be gullible to the ways and the tactics of our enemies, who are terrorists, etc. And I think we need a multi-pronged approach, even more strengthened. That one, internally, we may want to find ways how our security agencies, together with individuals and institutions, continue to work together for the benefit of the nation in terms of enhancing security, in terms of issues of surveillance, etc. But also Kenya working with nations that are our neighbors to see to it, for example, that to the extent that Somalia remains unstable, then that poses a threat to the security of Kenya in very many ways. To the extent that there are certain corrupt individuals working in our security agencies who will take a dime to permit an individual that is an immigrant, especially an illegal one, to cross the borders, that poses a threat to every family member. Who knew that the threat to security under the issue of terrorism would come to the heart of a city? Would imagine that maybe because a particular border is porous, that the threat only faces individuals who are domiciled in those areas.
Right.
So when we look at it broadly, then we realize that there is much more that needs to be done in terms of values, in terms of character, etc. But what even disappoints me a little more, when I watch events happening in the north, that a particular military vehicle that is supposedly armored has been ripped apart by a device, all right? Then one wonders, if we as a nation expended colossal amounts of money to procure armored vehicles, and then we come to realize that the issue of armored vehicles was perfect theory. Because how? I've not seen, go to what is happening out there. The US and their allies are fighting ISIS and other places. When you talk about an armored vehicle, and if such armored vehicles were to be deployed to the north, we would not see them being ripped apart the way they are. So I think...
Is that true, really, though?
No, the thing is this. Just before Gikonyo gets in, I would say this, that while we commend the work of our security agencies, there are few harder questions still to be asked.
Absolutely.
And that much more needs to be done by them and by us.
All right. And on Friday, when the president was commissioning that Modika barracks in Garissa County, they said that the essence of that is to deal with the terror threat in the northeastern region. And obviously, there has been several deaths, including on June 22nd, where 8 police officers were attacked at Yumbi's border patrol camp. But the impact of all this, not just the deaths of officers and civilians, but also what it does to the socio-economic situations of the northeastern region. And you've seen the situation of education sector in the area. So ultimately, what is this that we need to do? Because Operation Linda Nchi has been on since 2011. It's 8 years now. It will be 9 years next year. What is this that we need to fix so that even as we deal with the security threat along the border, we also fix the socio-economic situations of the people in the northeastern?
I'll give my view on this and maybe take a slightly different perspective that could look at that. The global war on terror, radicalization, finds its expression in the community. And at the end of the day, you're going to need to look at what investments are being made at the national level, but also at the community level. And there is a disconnect in that regard. Because in terms of the coverage of security personnel, first of all, you don't want to securitize the state because of the war on terror. You don't want to have armed personnel all over the country because of the war on terror. You want to have your existing security systems able to deal with this. That means you need to look at your policing structures. How well are they prepared to deal with and provide information, intelligence? And this is where there is a big disconnect. For instance, the National Policing Act anticipates community policing. Nyumba Kumi was then implemented, and there is a community policing implemented under 2 different structures, because the government has the national administration coordination line, and the national police. So there's been ongoing tug of war around the management of security. This was sorted out somewhat, especially after the Westgate attack. You know, the line of authority and control was somewhat aligned. But when you go to the ground, we've been working in the ground in a number of counties, the situation is very different. We find that there are parts of this country that don't have police officers, that don't have police stations, that have police officers or police stations that don't have then equipment, facilities.
Can I cut you short? Because you're literally heading to the question that I'm going to ask, and you're already there. So can I ask it as you attach it with your answer?
Yes.
Just the aspect of, do Kenyans have confidence in the way you've said the security is not just a national level, it's at community level? Do Kenyans have confidence in our normal security? When I mean normal, I'm not talking about our soldiers at Garissa who are protecting our borderline. I'm talking about that security guard at a mall, checking your car. For those who use public buses, when they're checking you there, you know, they just sweep it away. Do Kenyans, the lack of confidence that we have in our own security at that level says a lot.
I think the first line of security you'd look at is, let's look at, you know, the public security. Let's look at police. Of course, I think enemy number 1 of the people of Kenya is the police. And let me take it back. Let me take it back.
Thank you.
If you ask Kenyans, who are you most afraid of when you're out, they will say we are more afraid of rogue police officers. And let me use the word rogue.
That's better.
Because it's not, there have been attempts at police reform. We need to go back
I still doubt it, it's okay.
I think statistics show this. Even the
what kind of statistics?
Information
is there a poll?
Excuse me. Yes, there have been polls. There have been polls about
we're not allowed to
about perceptions of Kenyans. Their experience with police forces continue to be negative. There had been an upward trend, and somehow we seem to have lost ground. So that once again, so the point I was going to make, community police. Excuse me, the community police.
One moment, Ambassador.
You know, the community policing structures were supposed to be set up so that there can be there can be accountability of policing with the community, and can be collaboration, and you can have a system of security governance at the local level. This has not been implemented. If you look at the national budget, 50,000 shillings is what because we did the maths and said if every police station was to implement, how much money do they have to implement community policing? And we found it would be the equivalent of 50,000 shillings. And this is keeping in mind we don't have enough police station coverage. We don't have enough personnel. We don't have enough equipment. So the point I'm making is this. A lot has been done, but there's a glaring gap. For me, I would say, from what we've seen is, number one, the government is still centralizing very much. So they don't want community policing because you have to let go of funds and of some of the responsibility. They haven't set up community policing authorities that are supposed to be set up at county level. So actually there are critical structures that are supposed to be set up that cannot be set up because the government ideologically is looking at the state and thinking, we're going to set up a barracks, we are going to use force, and we're going to securitize, buy more armored vehicles and all of that.
So you think a social approach would be...
We need a social approach, we need an accountability approach, we need a community inclusive approach. So we need a mindset. So we need to deal with the mindset of the state, which is securitized and centralist, and we need to deal with governance. Because again,
just before Dr. Sam comes in,
unfortunately, we need to take a break.
There's the aspect of...
Javas, we need to take a break because we have to pay bills. When we come back, we'll be concluding the conversation. Of course, time has really passed, and but we'll have a moment to take some more views on the topics that informed conversations in 2019. Back shortly.